Hello, and welcome back to A Lil Spooky. This is a podcast about things that spook us just a little bit. Things like aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, or when you're going for a swim at your local swimming pool and you start to drown. Oh no. Lifeguard saves you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. How thoughtful of her. You fall in love. Fast forward, future, years later, you're married to her. You have children, wonderful life. You're on your deathbed. But then you wake up. You were just passed out after you had drowned and been resuscitated. And you go into a deep depression for several years.
Because your lifeguard was actually your large cousin Gary.
No, there was never a lifeguard. It was all a dream. My name is Everett.
And I'm Colleen. Okay.
That's a famous story that was, I forget how long ago it was, but that was an actual or a similar experience someone actually had.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty famous on Reddit or something, but like someone got into a fight or like got hit in the head or something, and then like got together with the girl who helped him after being injured. They had a family together and lived together for like 10 years, but then he woke up after being passed out when he got hit in the head. And it was all a dream, and he actually did go into a super deep depression.
I do remember reading something similar to that. And he was out for longer than just a couple of minutes, though. But
I think he woke up at the same place. Like there were police and like EMT and stuff. But
your brain is such a spooky place. The fact that you can live an entire lifetime in just a couple of minutes. It's just as scary as I read somewhere that like you live half your perceived life by the time you're 7 years old.
Right.
In terms of time.
Yeah, perception of time.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's insane to me. It's
we're
spooky.
almost dead. We're almost dead.
Practically.
I'm not even 30 yet. I'm almost dead.
Yeah. Ugh. Anyways.
Well, yes, we're moving on to part 2.
Yes.
Continuation.
This is part 2 of the Cash-Landrum UFO Incident. So if you haven't listened to the first episode, you're going to want to go back and do that because this probably won't make any sense otherwise.
What was the name of the story again?
Cash-Landrum UFO Incident.
Sounds pretty cash money. Let's do it.
Make that paper. Okay. So in the last episode, we discussed the actual UFO encounter itself and the immediate medical aftermath for the victims, Vicky and Colby Landrum and Betty Cash. And we left off with a UFO enthusiast and scientist named John Schuessler getting involved in the investigation and hiring doctors who concluded that the victims were likely suffering from either radiation poisoning or some kind of mysterious chemical exposure.
Sure. Yeah.
And at the time, you and I were talking about how we thought it was weird that the doctors didn't immediately recognize radiation poisoning.
Or at least didn't say they did. Like they said they did not.
Right. Well, we got an interesting message from one of our listeners, Doc Astro. He is working on completing his physics degree, and he works currently at NASA Goddard doing particle physicsy things.
Something beyond our
Something
scope.
Important and sciencey. And he says that due to the nature of the work and the work of his professors at school, they make very sure that the students can identify radiation poisoning and they know the signs and the symptoms. And he wrote that Betty Cash, who is the one who got the worst,
the one that stood outside the car for like 5 minutes.
Yep, she's the one who got the most sick. She shows more signs of radiation poisoning than just the skin problems, the hair loss, and the vomiting.
Right.
Particularly of note is that she got better for a few days and was able to leave the hospital, left, and then a few days later just like plummeted and had to go back. Right?
Yeah, so like feigning getting better, but then kind of delving back into the
not necessarily
symptoms.
feigning. Like she was getting better, but then all of a sudden, boom, got worse for apparently no reason.
Right.
And she also eventually developed cataracts. This
I didn't know that was connected to radiation.
Yeah, I would have thought that was just a symptom of like staring at a extremely bright light for a significant period of time. But according to Doc Astro, radiation poisoning.
Could be a little both, honestly, too, though.
True. Apparently, these are super clear symptoms of severe radiation poisoning, and he's surprised that she survived at all. And he also points out that, as much as it hurts me to say this, you, Everett,
Me,
were
Everett.
correct in the last episode.
What claim did I make? I don't even remember.
You had said that maybe the doctors didn't recognize this as radiation poisoning because we don't have that much information about severe radiation poisoning.
Enough guinea pigs.
Yeah. And I was like, there's tons of examples of radiation poisoning. Like, people study radiation all the time.
Girl.
But apparently you were correct, because we do have a lot of information about people who have died of radiation poisoning.
From incidents and stuff.
Yes, nuclear reactor tests, bombs killing a lot of people. So we know what it looks like when radiation is going to kill you. But we don't have enough information about people who have been that severely radiated and survived.
Like the resistance, or like testing the resistance to radiation, or like our limits to what we can be exposed to and survive.
Right. I guess I would have thought at this point in time, there has been enough information about radiation that like we would know that, but apparently not. And I mean,
how
like,
can you ethically test that?
Right, you can't. You cannot ethically subject people to dangerous levels of radiation. Like, we're not Joseph Mengele. This is America. If we're going to do things, we'd hide them.
I would be surprised if there wasn't a Joseph Mengele-esque person working on experiments in America right now.
Yeah, but he's not going to publish his results for the world to see.
That's true.
Yet, Anyways, that's where we left off. Thanks, Doc Astro, for your input, because we know nothing about radiation.
Yeah, and thank you for affirming my bullshit.
Yeah, but the interesting point is he kind of confirms the idea that it is likely radiation poisoning.
Yeah. I think that much is obvious. I think we have to pretty much...
Well, yeah, but I mean, even if it wasn't radiation poisoning and it was a mysterious chemical, it would still be equally mysterious.
Right. Well, similar effects would be in play.
Right. But the fact that it's radiation kind of leads you more towards like a space ship.
Yeah. Or just
deal.
Not necessarily. I mean, whatever this craft was, even if it was human made, it could be running on nuclear power.
Valid point. Yes. Right.
I just think it's safe to assume this is definitely a radiation incident.
I agree with you. I do. I fully agree with you. But you might change your mind in a little bit. We'll get there.
We'll see.
We'll
see.
Anyways, that's the very, very short recap where we left off. And now let's talk about the investigation into the event. So there's a lot of information out there, like I said in the last episode. A lot. But like the last episode, most of my information is coming from the book written by the investigator, John Schuessler. However, I only had access to probably a little more than 2/3 of the book.
Why is that?
So the listener who provided me with the book provided me with an online copy.
Sure.
That was only about 2/3 of the way complete. And I was like into it. I read the whole thing. And when I got to the cutoff point, I was like, well, I'm just going to buy the book for myself. Why not?
Right.
You know,
when you want to finish it.
I want to finish it. I want to know what happens. But you can't, because it has become somewhat of like a collector's item. It's apparently no longer in print. The cheapest one I could find was on eBay or maybe Amazon for like $89.
You're telling me that there's not a PDF version or like an audio, or not audio, like a Kindle version of the full book?
Mm-mm. Not one that I could find.
That's stupid.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? But
what's he hiding?
I don't know, but I mean, like the copies of these books go for like $200 on eBay. We don't make money off this podcast, so...
Well, not a significant amount.
Yes. Well, let's just say, if you are a Patreon supporter, Thank you very much. Your contributions go towards like general upkeep of the website.
That's behind the scenes stuff. We're not making a good income, we should say.
No, we're not. Right. I don't have $89 to drop on this book. So I got as much as I could from the book. And then I did as much research as I could outside of the book. Bunch of different articles, interviews, documents, whatever I could. But I still want you to know, because I know somebody's going to comment this on YouTube. I know this is a general overview. It's a good story. Just listen to me tell the story and then decide if you want to keep going, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Sassy.
This story is wild. And I just want people to know that there's more to it than I'm able to tell you. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. I don't want you to think that I'm giving you every detail of the entire story, because I can't. I mean, unless we made this like a several part series.
Sure.
So we've got victims who have had a very close encounter with what they believe to be a spaceship or government experimental craft. Right?
Yes.
They're suffering from apparent radiation poisoning. And even though they are sick, and in Betty's case, like practically dying, they contact every conceivable agency, government agency they can think of, to get more information. And they're given the runaround the entire time. Now, remember, even in the immediate aftermath of this event, they're listening to the radio, they're watching TV, they're talking to people, because how could nobody else have seen this? They even saw 23 government helicopters flying past this craft. So clearly somebody saw it. Why isn't it in the news?
Right, yeah.
So that's suspicious to begin with. And now they're calling the Air Force, the police, politicians, their local government. They get a hold of their actual, like, state senators, then U.S. senators, the media, and nothing. They get nothing from anybody. Just, why don't you try calling NASA? Why don't you call this UFO number? Why don't you call these people? Nobody's able to give them answers.
Right.
Until one day, they get a phone call that 2 FBI agents were going to be coming to take statements from them.
Okay.
Which seemed odd, because nobody else was taking them seriously. So how did the FBI get involved? Like,
how much time has passed since they learned about that?
A couple weeks.
Okay. So it's still pretty fresh.
This whole investigation, seems to take place within a year.
Okay. But just a couple weeks-ish.
Yeah, maybe a couple months at most. Okay. But the FBI contacts them. They're like, we're gonna be sending 2 FBI agents, so be on the lookout. Now, this seemed weird to them because no one else was taking them seriously. So they call the FBI back to confirm that 2 agents actually will be coming to visit them. And they spoke to an Agent McGee, who said that she had absolutely no record of agents planning to visit them. She was like, it's possible, but it's very unlikely that the FBI would get involved in something like this at all. I mean, this isn't the X-Files, which isn't out at this time. But if it was out, she would have said, this isn't the X-Files. She advised them that if people claiming to be FBI agents did come visit them, to get their names, their phone numbers, their ID numbers, their car type, the license plates, any information about them possible. Don't take any chances. It's probably not actual FBI agents.
Okay.
And she turned out to be correct, because no FBI agents actually ever showed up.
So whoever was planning on coming got spooked, or it was a prank.
Yeah. Yes, I'm leaning more towards prank, but I'm getting Stardust Ranch vibes, where people say they're going to come and then never show up, and then say they're going to come and then never show up. And it's more of like a Men in Black type thing than a...
Oh, okay. So you think it actually is something a little more sinister and not just someone trying to insert themselves into a potential interesting event.
I'm going to guess it's more likely a prankster, but just the overall UFO aspect of this makes me want to believe it was in a Men in Black situation.
Sure.
But it's more than likely.
And they had the wherewithal to not come after they figured there was
They're doing a follow-up. Yeah. Right. So since that FBI contact turned out to be a dead end, they were like, well, are we going crazy? What's going on? So they decide to undergo hypnosis in order to get any information or detail that they can remember that might lead them towards some clue of who to get a hold of.
When you say they, is it both
Vicky and Betty?
What? And Betty was the one that got really hurt.
Betty was the one who was very ill, yes.
I'm surprised she would want to relive the...
She's determined to figure out how this happened to her and what it was. And I don't blame her. I mean, if you believe that the government was involved in basically ruining your life, because she was never the same after the incident. Like, she was in the hospital multiple times a year. She lost all her hair. She ended up getting breast cancer.
Right.
Like, she was not doing well.
Okay.
So they undergo hypnosis to gather more information. And while they're we've talked about this in the past, hypnosis is clearly not like a foolproof thing.
Right.
It all depends on who's hypnotizing you, who's asking the questions, and who's interpreting your answers. But it turns out that they essentially completely corroborate their original stories. The exact same. And they convince the investigators and the hypnotist that they were reliving a real event.
Sure. Okay. I mean, it'd be weird if, their hypnotic recount would be different. I mean, the event happened so recently, it would be fresh in their minds, and they told people about it right after it happened. So it'd be weird if it differed,
Yeah, but if they had made up the story, then were put under hypnosis and things were different.
Sure,
or maybe they had seen things and then didn't remember them.
Right.
But this kind of confirmed that they were remembering correctly what happened to them.
Right.
And they weren't able to recall any additional details. Vicky, under hypnosis, even gave information that she believed it was a man-made object. That it was not like an alien spacecraft. She is under the firm belief that it was a terrestrial government-made secret machine.
Sure. Okay.
She was very sure it's not something like a meteor, and she was able to give better details about the U.S. insignia on the helicopters that were chasing it. In fact, she was able to describe the helicopters so well that they were actually able to narrow down that only U.S. military units operated helicopters of that kind in the area. Remember in the last episode, I had mentioned that these were helicopters with two rotors.
Right, yeah.
And so they were able to actually narrow down the type of helicopter and that these are military helicopters. Civilians, at least in this area, do not own this kind of helicopter. Or at least if they do, they're not registered.
There wouldn't be like 23 of them or whatever you said.
Right, exactly. So after the hypnosis, I mean, nothing really happened. It confirmed their stories. But again, they're not really getting interest from any third parties willing to give information. So they decide to do the one thing that may either get them made fun of or taken more seriously. And that is...
Contact MUFON.
Nope.
Oh.
Because you forget, John Schuessler was a member of MUFON.
Right.
So he was already involved.
Oh, okay. I forgot
point.
He was already involved at this
right.
point.
Yes. They decided to do the one drastic thing of going on the television and telling their story.
Sure.
And that triggered something in the government because apparently after their TV segment aired, a congressional inquiry was started that forced the Pentagon to get involved to determine if military aircraft was actually used in the incident.
Was it just the local news they appeared on, or what was it?
It wasn't the local news. It was something like Unsolved Mysteries or
something of that ilk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. So the Pentagon's investigation actually came back pretty quickly saying, nope, nothing to see here. In fact, we don't even keep that kind of helicopter in this area. So you got to be mistaken.
Yep.
However, that kind of helicopter might have been used by the Army instead of the Air Force. So you maybe try them instead. And the Army, after they called them, got a hold of Vicky and Betty and was like, yep, we have a couple of those, but like we don't even fly those on Monday nights. So it couldn't have been us.
We were playing bingo.
Yeah. I mean, we don't fly them on Mondays, and we especially don't fly them on Monday nights.
Yeah, not bingo night.
Well, and John Schuessler was like, that's not the truth, because he was easily able to pull flight logs made by that kind of helicopter recorded in a log on the Monday, literally 4 days before they called to tell him that they didn't fly those on Mondays. So like he already had like flight logs in his hands that were like, that's clearly not true. So someone's lying about something.
Right, yeah. That's pretty obvious.
Right. So Schuessler requested flight plans, aviation records, aircraft records, but whoopsie. Looks like all those were destroyed. We'll keep looking into it, though. You know, we'll try to find those for you. But it looks like somehow all those got destroyed. All those records gone.
It was like some sort of big fire. Right?
Yeah.
Big fiery explosion on the highway. And
yeah, I don't know. We'll keep looking into it, though. But, you know, just keep in mind, the U.S. military didn't have anything to do with those helicopters. You don't need flight plans or anything. Just trust us.
Yeah.
So in 1982, which is a year after the incident, Lieutenant Colonel George Sarin of the Department of the Army Inspector General began a thorough, formal government investigation into the encounter. But again, he could not find any evidence of the helicopters that were spotted by the victims. He did, however, say, quote, Miss Landrum and Miss Cash were credible. There was no perception that anyone was trying to exaggerate the truth. End quote. Now, there's a lot more details about the locations of these kinds of helicopters across Texas and who flies them and where they were located and when. I don't want to get too far into it. The point is nobody will take responsibility for those helicopters.
Right. And I mean, why would they? Like,
right.
You know, yeah. Why would you want to get involved?
Right. So that's the helicopters. Basically a dead end. Nobody's going to take responsibility for them. It's pretty clear Vicky and Betty and Colby all agree there were 23 of them that were herding whatever this UFO was to a specific location.
It's such a specific number. I feel like if there were that many helicopters, how would you be able to count them in time before, like, you know?
Well, they were able to watch them flying in. The helicopters weren't there from the beginning. It took them,
right. I know.
They were there for about 15 minutes before they showed up.
It's just like, that's a large number of helicopters. Like, I'd lose track trying to count them in the dark in the sky.
Well, yes. Okay. So, I didn't mention this because it's just kind of a small detail, but Vicky originally saw 26. Betty saw like 22. Colby was like, wait, no, there's 2 more over there. And then they came to the consensus that there were 23 as they were driving. So I guess 23 was their like agreed upon number. There were at least 23, but there could have been more.
Give or take a couple.
Yes. So I guess I wouldn't take 23 as a hard and fast number, but they all seemed to agree that there were above 20 helicopters there.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the helicopters. April 1981. So while the helicopters are still being investigated, 5 months after the incident, Vicky is at her home in Dayton, Texas, with Colby, trying to get back to normal life as much as she can. And there's a fair going on in town. Now, remember, this is a small town, so it's kind of like one of those little county fairs. Technically, it was a fair put on by the Future Farmers of America.
Yeehaw.
Yes. One of the events of this fair was that a CH-47 helicopter was going to be landing there and offering tours so that kids could like walk through, check out a real helicopter.
Like they do with like fire engines.
Exactly. And that happens all the time. Like when I was in high school, I was I wasn't in the hospital, but I was visiting family in the hospital, and a nurse came in and was like, there's a helicopter. You guys want to go on it? And we were like, yeah, we do. Helicopter ride. But they were like, oh, no. You just get to see the inside. And we were like, we'll hard pass.
What? Why?
Why would you want to just see the inside?
I mean, what would you rather do? Hang out in a hospital or check out the inside of a helicopter?
Would I rather like watch cable and like eat snacks, or would I rather go to a confined space with like 2 chairs and a steering wheel?
I mean, and then you can leave.
Anyways, they're offering tours of this helicopter. Now, CH-47s are precisely the helicopter that they determined to be present at the time of the UFO
Sure, yes.
event. So when she hears this is happening, Vicky calls a friend of hers who knows about the whole incident, and she grabs Colby, and she and her friend and Colby race over to this fair, and they get in line to tour the helicopter, right? Because they're like, well, this is our shot, basically, to kind of like confirm, was this the helicopter we saw? I don't know. And they're grasping at straws at this point,
Sure,
to get any information they
can. And it would be a fun thing to do, to see the inside of a helicopter.
I would agree with you, but anytime after this incident, Colby saw helicopters, airplanes, heard thunder, lightning, he would be thrown into massive panic attacks.
Sure, I was just more so making fun of you.
So they had to do a lot of convincing to Colby, like, this is our shot. It'll be fine.
Why they even have to bring him?
Because 2 adults in line to see a helicopter. This was
That's
for the
true.
kids.
Okay, that's true.
So they needed Colby. And when they get there, they get to the front of the line, and Colby, like, Vicky's elbowing Colby, like, pretend to be interested, ask for the driver's autograph. Which is weird to me, but like maybe kids like pilot stuff. So anyways, he gets an autograph. He gets the driver's name on a piece of paper. Sneaky. And, you know, he's getting the autograph. He's like, hey, kid, you like helicopters? And he's like, gee, yeah, they're great. And Vicky's standing there, and she's casually mentioning like, hoof. December 29th, I saw a bunch of helicopters just like this one. Like, you know, what was up with that?
Very smooth.
And the pilot was like, oh, yeah. My platoon was actually called out that night by the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. And not just us, a bunch of other units, too, sometime around 9:15 p.m. that night.
Oh, yes, that thing you were looking for. It's exactly me.
Yes. But he was saying it in kind of a braggy way. Like, yeah, we were there, you know, us and a bunch of other units were called out to this mysterious thing at 9:15.
So if we're to assume that this entire story is true, as far at this point at least, I would imagine he would probably feel pretty braggy because whatever happened, he has to keep it a secret, right?
Right. And who's this lady? He's just at a county fair in a tiny town.
And if he has a chance to talk about it, but leaving the confidential stuff out, like, why wouldn't he talk about that?
Right. And that's exactly the vibe I got reading this book. Like, he was like, yep, I was called out there sometime around 9:15 that night. And at this point, Colby pipes up and is like, oh, no, that is the night that the UFO hurt me. And the pilot was like, I'm not talking about this anymore. You know, like, he completely shut down.
Oh, yeah. Stupid Colby.
Yes. Well, he's 7. Give him a break. He shuts down, and he looked like he said something he wasn't supposed to and was like, hey, there's people behind you. Move along now.
Yeah.
At this point, Vicky realizes he's not going to say anything else. So she starts to guilt trip him. She's like, look, you know, she takes off her wig. She's like, I'm losing my hair. It's been 5 months since the event. We saw it. We saw your helicopters. We're still covered in blisters. Neither of us can stand in direct sunlight for very long because we have light sensitivity. She's like, look at this young boy. Look what they did to him. I need as much information as you can give me. And he's like, I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't help you. Next. So they weren't able to get anything else. But the helicopter said U.S. Army on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy's name was Willie R. Culberson.
Culberson?
Culberson or Culbertson.
Okay.
Either one.
When he name dropped the sheriff too.
Yep, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. There's confirmation that the insignia was Army, not Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that pilots fly the same helicopters. Like you have your helicopter. This is the helicopter you are assigned to. So that helicopter would likely have been the one present on the night of December 31st.
Most likely, or like maybe a pilot switches between a couple different craft, like in their platoon. But since so many craft showed up to that event,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it had to have been one of them, yeah.
Sure. So on this like chance encounter, they did get some valuable information. They at least got a name of somebody who was there and confirmed that the insignia on the side was U.S. Army.
And who called them in.
So now they're getting somewhere. So they call Culbertson within the next week. And they talk to him and they talk to his commanding officer because they're desperate for information. Like, if you won't talk to us, we'll talk to the person above you. And Schuessler is like, hey, I hear there were a lot of helicopters involved in this incident on December 29th.
Right.
And Culbertson's like, yeah, yep. And Schuessler's like, was there a UFO involved? And Culbertson's like, yeah. And Schuessler said, were you there? And Culbertson was like, no. No, we weren't involved. And we can't respond to calls from a sheriff's office anyways. We're the Army. Since when do we take calls from the sheriff? So it was kind of a dead end. He admitted that he was there and that there was a UFO, but then he kind of backtracked.
Right. I mean, yeah, he has to be sworn to secrecy in some manner. Like,
right.
Whether it be threat of, like, being dishonorably discharged or, like, maybe even more sinister threats, like kill him or his family type stuff.
Right. So then after that, they go above him. They got the Army Inspector General involved. And that man said, Willie Culbertson? He didn't know what he was talking about when he was talking to you guys. You know, he's just confused. He's just one of those guys who talks, you know? He just likes to be involved in things. He was just telling stories. So inconclusive, because they couldn't get any more information out of Willie. And obviously, you go above him, they're not going to admit to anything either.
No.
So their next step, contact the Montgomery Sheriff's Department to see if anyone made a call that night about a potential UFO. But wouldn't you know it, nobody who worked in the sheriff's office the night of December 29th worked there anymore. At all. None of the
even the sheriff?
No, none of them worked there, and none of the new employees even knew any of the old employees' names at all. Huh. They were like, "Hey, why don't you call Carl Mangogna, Carl. Why don't you call this guy Carl, who was in charge of the police helicopter flights in the area on that night?"
I thought you were having a stroke.
I don't know. Mongolia. Anyways, they call him because he was in charge of police helicopter flights in the area on that night. But it turns out he doesn't even work there anymore. He doesn't work there anymore either. So they contacted his new place of employment, but got no answer.
Do you think they were put in like witness protection, or do you think they were just like, just moved?
Don't move on and don't say anything. Yeah, I don't know. But when they couldn't get a hold of him, they called his new job. New job wouldn't answer. So they tracked down his father to get a hold of his number. And when they finally got a hold of this man, his statement was, "I have no memory of the events on the night of December 29th, 1980. And he sends them to someone else, who sends them to someone else, who sends them to someone else, and the investigation goes nowhere.
Right.
So that's the helicopters. That is and that was the main bulk of the investigation, because that is the proof that the government was involved you know?
Well, yeah, and you can't investigate a UFO if you have nothing to go on.
Exactly. So when they keep hitting these dead ends, they look into other possible avenues. Maybe it was a hot air balloon. And I mean, it was spurting flames out the bottom, but it's the wrong shape, right? Remember, it was like a diamond shape.
You can have a diamond balloon.
Yes, true. Right. But like
they got a Meowth balloon in Pokemon.
I mean, okay, valid point, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Additionally, the route it was taking would have been difficult for a hot air balloon at the time. And
it was stuck, though.
True. Valid point. But when they looked into it, the weather that night was like not ideal for ballooning. Like,
again, it was stuck.
It was stuck, yes, but like experienced ballooners would not have flown that night. So it's possible, but unlikely that it was a hot air balloon.
Side note, hot air balloon is the one mode of travel I would never go on.
Why?
People die all the time. I always see news stories of hot air balloon crashes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do people still do it? It's like
it seems fun. It seems like a Ferris wheel, but high. Or
let's put a giant balloon in the sky that has a giant fire spitting into it.
How is it any worse than skydiving? Jumping out of a plane with only a thin parachute.
Well, that's not a mode of travel. That's just a thing to do.
I don't think people are like, all right, we got to get to Boston. Let's hop a balloon. Like, you don't travel on a hot air balloon anymore.
Not anymore. No. Anyway, go on.
Okay, so the airport that night also claimed there were no balloons flying in the area that night, and the fact that a balloon would be chased by helicopters is like moderately questionable. So it's possible, it's unlikely it was a hot air balloon.
Also, yeah, that wouldn't explain the radiation either.
Right. So the next thing that the investigators looked into was radar data, just to see if there was anything spotted in the sky that night.
Okay.
So they contacted air traffic control to get radar data for the area that night, but shucks, they only keep that information for 30 days, and they were past the 30-day mark. So
I will say, though, that does make sense because that's a lot of data to keep,
yes.
And especially in 1980s, early 80s, yeah, they wouldn't be keeping that for more than a month.
Paper. Well, I suppose at this point probably did have things on computers, but it would be tricky. And computers had like 1 gigabyte of data.
Not even.
A megabyte.
So many bytes.
Tons of bytes. Anyways, in addition, radar coverage was pretty spotty at that time for the height they believed that the craft was at. Because of that, a UFO could probably, or anything really, could have easily operated without official radar detection.
Yeah.
Just because how spotty it was. Right. So the government could easily plead ignorance of the existence of a UFO, whether it was military, Russian, or from outer space. They could have easily been like, well, we didn't see it. No radar.
I'm going to say of those 3 potential options, a Russian aircraft seems the least likely.
Why?
Just a random small hodunk town in Texas, just a Russian aircraft, experimental craft.
Have you not seen Red Dawn? This is the Cold War.
The biography of Red Dawn, yes.
Anything could happen. So to wrap up the story in the investigation, Betty and Vicky were eventually told that they should hire a lawyer and seek compensation from the U.S. government for their injuries, since they believed that government helicopters and agencies were involved and had knowledge of this, and that it was likely a government experimental craft. Or if the government knew about UFOs and knew that there was one in the area, they should have been warning surrounding areas of potential danger.
Okay. So did they do that?
Yes, they sued the government for $20 million, and they even found an attorney who would take their case on for free.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of publicity, I would imagine, for something like this.
And there was a testimony, like it was taken to trial. Like it wasn't just immediately dismissed. There was testimony given by the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Betty, Vicky. They all gave their individual stories, but the judge eventually dismissed their case, saying that they hadn't been able to prove that the helicopters were government helicopters. And the military testified they don't have any diamond-shaped aircraft like that in their possession, so it couldn't have been their fault.
Yeah, I was thinking like
They couldn't find
best option or best case scenario would have been if the military settled out of court, because there's no way they could have won that case going against the elite attorneys of the military, and also they really don't have any proof other than their injuries.
Yeah, the military would never have settled out of court. It's not. They didn't even have any kind of paperwork proving that the copters existed.
Yeah, I guess my thought was, though, that would be negative public opinion of bringing this to trial and having to even entertain the notion that it's something they caused.
But at the same time, we're talking about a UFO. I feel like most people would be like, these ladies are crazy. They're suing the government over a UFO.
Yeah, but I mean, look at them.
In terms of their illness?
Yeah, their injuries.
True.
Something did it.
Yes. And we will get to a couple theories in a minute.
Okay.
But there was no resolution. They basically stuck to their story and continued to get sick every year.
Yeah. And Colby's doing, I mean, other than his distress physically, you said, I believe last episode, that he's pretty much fine. Because he was had less exposure, and also he was a young kid at the time. So
yeah, it seemed like the only problems he had were he had some intestinal troubles, and then light sensitivity and the mental trauma.
Right. But like he was able to get over the blistering and that kind of stuff.
As far as I know, yeah. But he was also not involved, like, in terms of recording and releasing medical information, his was not nearly as open as Betty and Vicky's.
Child at the time, yeah.
Right. So here's an interesting fact. Betty and Vicky were not the only ones to witness UFOs around that time and in that area.
What the hell?
That night, a maintenance engineer near Houston saw a UFO at treetop level that was the length of 2 football fields, and he was able to sit there and watch it for 30 minutes.
What shape?
Did not say.
Okay.
Near Dayton, Texas that night, aka the city this happened in, Belle McGee saw a huge light at 9 p.m. in the sky, which is basically the exact time that this happened.
So it could have been the same craft, and it moved farther out of the city by 9:15 or whenever it was the event happened.
Right. That same night, Angela and Doug Stanley were driving down the same road that the encounter happened on and saw a huge light in the sky. That same night in Dayton, a man named Jerry McDonald was working on his yard around 9 p.m. when he saw a huge object in the sky rumbling about 200 feet up with a bright red light in the middle. Exactly what Colby saw when he first spotted the light or spotted the craft.
Were these people, especially the local ones, called as like additional eyewitnesses?
Mm-mm. He mentions that it had 2 jet propulsion engines and was the size of a football field. The next day, he experienced flu-like symptoms and was hospitalized a few weeks later for a related lung issue. He made a report that he thought the state of Texas Health Department should have been notified of the hazard at the time.
Huh. I think it's funny that everyone in Texas measures distance by football fields.
I know.
Yeah. So someone either dropped the ball in like trying to connect all of these, like especially since he made that report or whatever, or it was purposefully buried.
They all came up in John Schuessler's investigation.
No,
They're
sure.
in the book.
I'm just saying for the trial.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that they testified in the trial. I do think that some of these stories were brought up, but I don't know that they actually were brought in as witnesses.
So was this book finished before the trial?
No, but the investigation was.
Oh, okay.
So what do you think? Credible?
I mean, yeah. I would say it's like actually one of the most, if not the most credible UFO story I've ever heard, just because even though there's no like pictures or video evidence, like what else would cause intense radiation poisoning or sickness?
Yeah.
And
I think it's obvious that something happened.
Yeah.
You can't, I mean, this wasn't just like, oh, I saw a UFO and then it moved on. Like you could easily tell a story like that, fake an image like that. But like this is documented medical records.
Yeah. And those 2 women, well, maybe not Vicky, but Betty obviously died because of the complications, and the other two suffered. So, yeah, definitely something happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaning more towards military experimental craft than anything else,
Yeah.
though.
I am as well. I don't necessarily think that extraterrestrials were involved, though possible.
I mean, maybe it's, because we live in 2022 currently, but even in 1980, if UFOs, like alien extraterrestrials, are visiting Earth, they'd probably have something more advanced than just two jet propulsion,
Yeah.
Whatever, and they probably wouldn't get stuck for half an hour or however long it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
It
the
seemed like
military guiding them away or following them away, that seems weird too. So
Yeah.
it has to be military.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes. For that reason, I just think that a spacecraft would be a bit more advanced.
If we're to assume aliens are real and exist outside of our solar system, maybe even galaxy, their tech has to be so advanced to even get here. If they even bother coming to Earth, they're not going to have two jet propulsion levers. They'd have something else. So yeah, military, not Russia. I think this is American.
Okay, so there are some skeptics, as there always are. Here's some of their reasoning. So maybe some of this will change your mind. Schuessler did inspect the car that was involved in the incident.
Yeah.
He inspected it in 1981, within a few months of the incident occurring.
Right.
He used a Geiger counter to look for radioactivity. Nothing showed up. Absolutely no radioactivity around or in the car.
I guess I just don't know how long that would stick around.
I don't either. And I think it also depends on the type of radiation that hits the car, right? Because didn't we say that there was certain radiation that may not have penetrated the car?
Right, depending on the wavelength of whatever is being emitted. And also, I suppose it would also depend on the type of metal the car is made out of, too.
Sure.
Like maybe different, minerals or different metals are more resistant towards different wavelengths than others. I don't know. We have no, formal training in radiation tech, but it is a little weird. There is no trace.
Yeah, I feel like that's sort of thing like hangs on for a while.
Yeah. I mean, look at Chernobyl.
Right. So some skeptics think that what Betty and Vicky witnessed was the star Canopus, which is the second brightest star in the night sky and was in line with the road that they were on that night. But I just feel like it is very clear that they did not see a star. And
that star that's over, probably 100 light years away is what radiated them.
In addition, at that exact time in that location, that star would have been 26 degrees below the horizon. So they wouldn't have even seen it. But I don't know. Other skeptics claim that they likely did see something, right? And that their stories, like they were traumatized by something, but the health problems and stuff they had weren't necessarily caused by it. And they may have just been using it as a way to get the Air Force or the government to pay for their medical bills.
So if people are claiming that, what is the counter cause of the radiation poisoning?
Well,
or whatever is ailing them.
It's very easy to find their medical records after this event.
Right.
But the medical records of Betty prior to the event are not easy to access. And I don't know that she ever released them.
Okay.
Now we've had doctors confirm like this was what she was like before the event, but she won't release her medical records.
Well, she's dead.
Well, now, yes, but even before. So,
well, okay, but that wouldn't.
It just seems like a lot of work to get somebody to pay for your medical bills.
Well, and it wouldn't explain why Vicky and Colby are experiencing symptoms too. It just seems so stupid to say, because she won't release her records that, she's hiding something. It's like Obama not releasing his birth certificate. It's stupid.
Right. A lot of people believe Betty Cash has Munchausen syndrome and that the burns and stuff that were showing up on her body were clearly faked.
Or like
And that's why she
self-inflicted.
won't release her medical records. But again, if you were to believe the book that John Schuessler wrote, nothing like that was ever brought up in his investigation of her health prior to the event. All of the doctors stated, like, yes, she had heart surgery, but otherwise she was the perfect picture of health. So these particular arguments to me aren't, like, they're very easily explained away. So I
don't like that.
I'm sure there are stronger ones out there.
They were obviously caused harm.
Yes.
You can't say they weren't.
Right. Now, whether it was by the government, who's to say?
Yeah.
They were unable to prove it and are unable to prove it to this day. But that's it. That's the Cash-Landrum Incident.
Lots to think about here.
It's baffling.
Yeah, I guess. What else is there to be said? Because like there's no way of knowing, right?
No.
Can always theorize all day, but tell us what you think.
Yeah. Let us know.
Send us a DM. You can also, join our Discord if you want to talk about it too.
Yeah, be awesome.
I came across a story I want to share though.
Yes, so.
Completely unrelated.
Tell me.
I'm going to even put in a little bit of a content warning here too.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit more, I don't know, I don't want to say graphic, because it's not really graphic. It's just a little more controversial, I should say.
All right.
Backstory here. So in 2020, there were these 9 people that were charged with various crimes when they were basically causing trouble at a health clinic doing anti-abortion protesting.
Okay.
So they were causing distress for people either getting abortions, or I assumed it was at a Planned Parenthood, so maybe if it was...
Or some other
Sure,
like
so maybe
clinic.
it was
Sure.
even just women getting other forms of contraceptive or something like that.
Sure, but they were harassing people outside of a women's health clinic.
Yes. And I think in some cases there was like threats involved. There's a lot involved with that case, and it's still ongoing.
Okay.
But the story and this is developing today, so we don't have all the information yet. This is going to be more and more information is going to be released in due time. But one of those people that was involved in that series of protests was the subject of an anonymous tip that reached police in Washington, D.C. recently. This anonymous tip said that this person by the name of... Sorry, I had to find the name. Her name is Lauren Handy. And she was she was one of the anti-abortion protesters, right?
Okay.
They basically raid her home, or at least they have a warrant to search the home.
What, did they think she had like stolen something from her from these protests?
No, the anonymous tip was that she was believed to have some sort of biohazard material present in her home.
What?
I don't know if the tip was more specific than that. Maybe they had an idea of what they were looking for, but either way, they wanted to respond to the tip, even if it was nothing, just to make sure, of course.
See, okay, now...
Of course, when it comes to political protesters, these types of things could just be attacks, just like swatting. People do that.
That's what I was just thinking. Like, I feel like if you would go, if someone was like, "You've got a biohazard in your house," I'm calling the police. When you need more proof than that to get a warrant, they had to have had enough proof to get a warrant to raid her house.
Exactly.
So there must have been more to it.
A judge had to sign off on it, which apparently one did. So they did search the home. It was on the 400 block of 6th Street Southeast in D.C. And what was found was several aborted fetuses in the home of the anti-abortion protester or fanatic, whatever you want to say.
What?
No one knows why.
What?
But she was in possession of several fetuses.
To do...
They were...
What with?
I don't know. They were found in some coolers, basically. Like she was keeping them, so they weren't rotting or anything. I don't know if she was planning on using it in some sort of drastic form of protest, or if there's something more malicious and dark going on. But like I said, this is still a a developing story. I assume there's going to be additional charges. I don't know what those charges would be, but you can't be in possession of this. Yeah.
Where do you get them?
No
you know
idea.
What I mean? Like you'd have to know.
I assume they're not her own. Like,
Oh, that would be a crazy twist if they were her own.
I'm gonna say probably not, but again, we don't have a lot of information yet. I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention because something weird is happening. Something's in the water.
This was gonna be. I don't want to get too gross with there was gonna be something gross at a protest planned with those.
Yeah, like were they gonna throw them at someone or something? Yeah, that's either way. I'll be keeping an eye on the developing story. That's more
than a little spooky.
That's
horrifying.
I don't necessarily even want to know more details on why she had them. I just want to see what happens with the upcoming trial.
Yeah,
I assume something's going to happen.
See, and that's interesting because oh man, I don't want to get too gross with this, but I guess at this point it's considered biohazardous material, right? It's not like if she had say taken them from a freezer somewhere, that would be like theft of a biohazardous material. It's not like she would be charged with murder. You know what I mean?
I mean, of course, we don't know enough yet, but I assume she didn't abort the babies herself. She probably stole these fetuses for some reason we don't know.
Yeah. Ugh. God, wow.
But yeah, this is definitely something creepy, weird going on, and of course, vaguely political. So
yeah, no, we won't get into that.
Let's not get into that.
This lady's obviously not normal.
Yes. Of course, right to free speech, but I think
that's not free speech.
I know this crosses the line a little bit, I think. Anyway, if you want to send us any stories you come across, or if you have a personal story you would like us to share on the podcast, you can send it our way. You can send it to Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or at NerdSlothHQ.
Or you can email us at podcasts@nerdsloth.com.
I am going to be in your ears next week with a story that I have been...
a long-awaited story.
I have been waiting to share. I've been waiting for the right moment, and it feels right about now. So next week, we're going to be talking about one of my most favorite stories ever. See you then.
All right. Well, we love you. Bye.
Bye.
Presented by NerdSloth,
a place for lazy nerds.
If you like what you heard, consider donating at patreon.com/nerdsloth so we can continue bringing you quality shows. Be sure to also leave us a review and share your favorite episodes and clips on social media. If you're looking for more content, visit us at nerdsloth.com.